Welcome to the Transform My Dance Studio podcast, powered by the Dance Studio Owners Association. Over the next 8 weeks, as we are thrilled to be welcoming the one and only Hillary Parnell as our guest host for a brand new series, Pliés to Profits. Hillary is the owner of Academy for the Performing Arts in North Carolina, and this very special series will give you an inside look into how Hillary has grown her dance studio as she shares her tips on building $1 million dance studio. In this season, Hillary will be diving into how she delegates tasks effectively, her less but better philosophy, how to bring in more revenue with less output, building community in your studio, and so much more. We hope you enjoy Pliés to Profits with Hillary Parnell.
Hey everyone! If you are just tuning in to the Transform My Dance Studio podcast, I hope you love it and will go back and listen to every single episode. This series, called Pliés to Profits, is in its second season, and I have had a blast hosting and sharing my passion for helping dance studio owners become the CEOs of their business, finding creative ways to increase revenue, and remember why you opened a dance studio in the first place. But I'm not the only one on the Transform My Dance Studio podcast. Some episodes are hosted by the wonderful women of Confetti on the Dance Floor. Becca Moore and Danny Rosenberg share the most amazing marketing ideas and add so much fun to every episode. You can also tune in and spend time with another fantastic dynamic duo, Angela Manella Hoffman and Jody Schilling. They share their tips and tactics on running a successful studio and just have the best banter ever. You'll absolutely adore them. There are other interviews and pro classes mixed in, and I hope you subscribe so that you can hear every single week. Now, before I get into today's topic, I thought I'd share just a little bit more about me and how I got where I am today and what that even actually looks like. I mean, I'm here giving you advice every week. Why should you listen to me in the first place? But more so, I know when I was in the early years of my business, I just really wanted to know how people got there. What steps they took, what path they took. I know everyone's path is different, but I really felt like if I could just know somebody's path, I could at least have an idea of how to get started and how I could eventually get to where I wanted to go. I guess first, it's important to tell you where here is, what my studio is like now, and what my life looks like before I get into how I got here, right? So my studio isn't huge by any means. It's large, but not huge. I hover between 750 and 1,000 students, depending on the time of year. And after 10 years, around 500 students, we moved from my original 4,000 square foot building to our 10,000 square foot building we have now. I currently have an admin team of 7 people, including a recreational director, 2 company directors, a preschool director, a marketing director who is also our performance group director, a new programs director, and my DOFI, or Director of First Impressions. They help me manage a team of about 30 teachers and another 35 teacher assistants. Our company, because we are a competitive studio, has about 120 kids in it. We have another 60 or so in our performance group. We offer some strictly recreational classes. Then we offer a progressive, non-competitive training program. And then we have competitive teams that compete a lot throughout the year and a pre-professional company that doesn't compete a lot throughout the year. I spend every day from 8 o'clock in the morning until 3 in the studio working, and this is my 3rd year not teaching any classes. When I leave every day around 3, I pick up my boys from school. There are 4 of them, so I play taxi driver for the rest of the night. They are 5, 7, 9, and 11, and only one of them dances kind of for real, competitively. Another one takes a little combo class because he's only 5. Shameless plug. I'd love for you to follow my son on Instagram at Spencer P Dance. He would love that. But we have almost no free time because I let my kids do everything. Our family time is watching each other play sports or dance or having important conversations in the car on the way to the next practice. I think team sports are really important, and I want my kids to be very well-rounded. Some might call us overscheduled, but I call them out of trouble and off of screens. So I also have a husband. I forget about him sometimes because he works a lot. He does not work with me because that would not be healthy for our marriage. Now, that's where we are. That's what my life looks like. It's wonderful. I love my life. I love the balance that I have. I love raising my kids, and I love being able to be there for them, even though we don't sit down for dinner together, but that's not because I'm at work. Now, how did I get here? My story is a little different than most. I did grow up dancing, but I never intended on opening a dance studio. In my mind, that was something that people did when they were retired and had lots of money and lots of free time. I was going to school to be a pediatric dentist. I actually have a biology and a chemistry degree, and I did not dance in college. It wasn't until 2001 the market crashed, and I was working for an ad agency right out of college because I decided not to be a pediatric dentist, and that ad agency closed, and I decided that I needed to do something. I moved home and asked my parents if I could live with them while I opened the dance studio. And I decided opening a new business in the middle of a recession was great because I was young and I had no idea what that even meant. And I was naive. In the beginning, I made every mistake in the book. I have no idea why anyone wanted to give me money. I was 22. I had no experience running a business. And I honestly wasn't even that good at dance. Thank goodness, that didn't seem to matter to most people. I hired teachers right off the bat. I learned everything I could from them. And eventually I started teaching more, and I found out I was actually pretty good at it. And more importantly, that I kind of loved it. It did become my passion, surprisingly. Then I went through the phase that so many of you are probably in. I was working 80 plus hours a week. Everything about the business was in my brain. I felt like the building was going to burn down if I wasn't there, and I was burning out fast. I didn't have time to do anything but put out fires constantly, and I couldn't seem to figure out how anyone could possibly sustain this for the long run. Why do people want to own their own business if all they do is put out fires all day long? I had watched my mentors, the studio owners that I grew up with, do the same thing, and I knew that I had to make a change. It wasn't because I didn't love being at the studio all the time. It wasn't because I didn't love teaching or being with the kids, and it wasn't because I was already burned out. It was because I wanted to be able to do this for a very long time. I wanted to set myself up to have the energy to keep going and keep owning this business for the rest of my life. I wanted to have the energy to keep working with kids, and I wanted to keep enjoying my job and career, and I didn't want to burn out. This sort of epiphany aligned with getting married and getting pregnant for the first time. My mom had actually had some complications with all of her pregnancies, so I was considered, quote, possible high risk. Basically, that just meant that they watched me extra carefully. I had some extra ultrasounds, and I needed to prepare myself to be on bed rest. On top of that, I was due in July, about 3 weeks after our recital weekend. So I spent that entire pregnancy planning for the possibility that I might not be at the recital. Now, this was only my 9th show. We kind of had it down pat, but everything was definitely still in my head. I worked so hard to get that recital systemized and ready to go without me. In the end, I never needed to go on bed rest, and the baby ended up coming 10 days late, but I was able to watch that recital from the light booth because my ankles were about the size of my head. It was glorious. It was my first taste of freedom, my first glimpse of what life would be like if I could replicate what I had done for the recital for everything. Over the next few years, I just kept thinking about how small businesses can never become big businesses if the owner does everything. How the owners of big, successful companies play golf and go on vacations and own beach houses and yachts. Even further, I would ask myself if the owner of a big, successful business would go home to cook and clean and do laundry. I would constantly ask myself if every task that I did throughout the day was a CEO level job or in my zone of genius. If the answer was no, then I would delegate it, including the cooking and the cleaning and the laundry. It didn't happen overnight, but eventually I found a really wonderful balance. So that's what I'm passionate about now, helping other studio owners find the balance between getting to do what they love and still having a life away from the studio. So let's talk about that studio. Let's get into our topic of today's podcast. We're going to talk about branding and what sets you apart from everyone else. This became incredibly important as I continued to grow to make sure that my studio wasn't advertising the same tap, jazz, and ballet classes as every other studio in town. How can we set ourselves apart and above our competitors? Now, on one hand, every dance studio offers the same thing. If you are a traditional studio that offers tap, ballet, and jazz, I'm sure there's one down the street. If you are an Irish dance studio, there's probably another Irish dance studio somewhere in your town offering the same kinds of classes. And then, even if you are lucky enough to be the only dance studio of your kind in town, you are technically in competition with every other activity people can spend their money on. If you have an adult studio, you compete with time, self-esteem, confidence, other bills to pay, a gym membership. If you have a kids studio, you're competing with all that along with gymnastics and soccer and karate and every other after-school program you can think of. If the economy is great, sure, there's some extra disposable income, but the competition is still there. And if we're in a recession, there's even less money to spend, and you need people to choose to spend it with you. How can you convince more people that their dollar should go to you? Well, there are a few factors that come into play here, and we'll only be able to touch on them in this podcast, but hopefully it will get you to start thinking about how your potential customers see you and ultimately choose you or not. So, a huge part of marketing is branding. Branding is defined by entrepreneur.com as the marketing practice of creating a name, symbol, or design that identifies and differentiates a product or service from other products or services. The key word here is differentiates. What makes you different? Why you? So let's start simple. What do you offer that your competitors don't? You might have to do some research. It could be a type of class you offer. Do you have an all boys class? A special needs class? It could be how you collect payments. Do you collect monthly and your competitor collects by the semester, or vice versa? Do you have 30-minute classes and your competitors are an hour? It doesn't matter if one is better than the other. It's just that they're different and it's how you present it. For example, you could boast that hour-long classes set you apart because dancers are able to have more repetition, get a deeper stretch, and parents can run errands during class. Or you could just as easily brag about your 30-minute classes, and they're what set you apart because dancers can create their own combo, try new types each year. The teachers are able to better keep their attention in only 30 minutes. It doesn't matter what it is. You just have to sell it as better. You will attract people who appreciate what you're selling if you let them know you're selling it. So what else? A big one that we always compare with dance studios is whether you offer competition or not. Both types of studios, both competitive and recreational, or whatever you would like to call it, both types of studios can rattle off benefits of either model. Both types of studios can be extremely successful, and I have very good friends who own very successful non-competitive studios and very successful competitive studios. Many studios use this as their differentiating factor between them and their competitors. But what if all of your competitors have the same kind of studio as you? Then you're going to have to dig a little deeper. Is your staff CPR certified? Do you have a new HEPA filter installed? Do you have a student-teacher certification program? The best way to come up with this list is to brainstorm with your team first. Make a list of all the things you do, all the things you take for granted. Most of them could totally be things your competition doesn't do, but here's the best part. Many of these things on the list might be things that your competition does do, but if nobody knows about it, it doesn't matter. Let's say you're going to offer a free download of the top 5 things you should look for in a new dance studio. Of course, you make sure that you have all 5 of those things, but even if your competition has 3 or 4 out of the 5, but they're not advertising those things, it doesn't matter. A huge portion of marketing is telling people things that you think they already know, but they don't. Here are a few more to think about. Do you have a certification like acrobatic arts? Do you do journaling with your dancers through a program like Dancers in Balance? Do you live by core values? Is your floor sprung? Are your floors marley? Are your classes small? And a hint here, yes, they are. No matter how big your classes are, they are small. Have you been in business for 10 years, 20 years, 30 plus years? Do you have a small dedicated staff or a large diverse one? Both can be sold as amazing. Do you offer the discipline of a dress code or the convenience of no dress code? Are you starting to see how you can easily make almost anything differentiate you from another studio? So once you start with a brain dump, you're going to really want to fine-tune this list because you're not going to advertise every single one of these points. You may think your customers care about your fancy Marley floors when they really just came to you because you have the best parade costumes. Or you may want the world to know that your teachers are all highly qualified, but your current customers actually came to you because you have the most convenient class times or a vending machine in your lobby. I mean, you never really know unless you ask them. So the next step in this process is to ask your customers why they chose you in the first place. You can start with a few people you know and trust, or send out a survey to your entire student body. You can make it multiple choice, or just leave it open-ended and let them respond. But definitely keep a survey short and simple, and you'll get the most responses. Ask them what they love about your studio, and then separately, why they chose you in the first place. Use those answers to create your ads and flyers and posters and social media content. Repeat it over and over again. You will start to draw in more of the same type of customer and ultimately end up with a low drama and totally content studio. The worst thing you can do is try to be everything to everyone. By polling your customers, you can figure out what your best customers love about you and then be that better than everyone else. Now, once you've differentiated yourself from your competition and everyone knows what you do and why you do it better, you can take it even a step further. You can make your image so recognizable that people don't even need to know what you offer. They know what you stand for, and that's enough. When you see a Gucci logo, you know it stands for quality and luxury. You don't need to even know what this season's latest bag actually looks like, but you already know whether or not you want to buy it just by seeing the logo. So the first step is to get your community to recognize your logo and your studio without the marketing budget of a major corporation. How do you do that? Well, first of all, make sure you have a good professional logo. Put it on everything. Wear it all the time. Create opportunities for your dancers to wear it to school and in the community and at performances. Our performance group has one costume, black leggings and a logo shirt. We have a spirit day where we ask the kids to take pictures of themselves around town or at school, and we give them a shout out on Instagram. Second, you want to make sure that you have a branding guide for your studio. Your team and your staff should live by a branding guide. It should include acceptable fonts, colors, layouts for signs, email templates, and social media post templates. Everything that is produced by your office should look professional and similar. If you don't know what I mean, take a field trip or two to a few big corporate stores. Maybe pick a fast food restaurant, a big store like Walmart or Target, and even a smaller retail store like Bath & Body Works. Walk around, take some pictures. Notice how fonts are used and how everything is different but all sort of looks the same. That is on purpose. That's how marketing works. It messes with your head. And those big companies pay lots and lots of money for it and are very good at it. Any lessons you can learn from them will help elevate your studio to the next level. If you're not sure why it even matters, besides just looking professional, I'll give you 3 examples of how this has played out for me. A few years ago, I had a meeting with a woman who was going to make some branded hair bows for us. Another thing to put our logo on. She came to the studio and I was explaining what I wanted, and I started to say, our studio colors are pink and blue and purple. And before I could tell her what those PMS numbers are, she said, "Hillary, I live in Apex. I know your studio colors." It was literally one of the greatest compliments I had ever gotten. She doesn't have a child dancing with us. She had never been inside our studio, but she knew us. She knew us so well that she knew our studio colors. Another time, I once had a dad ask if we were a franchise. And I said, "No, why?" And he said, "Oh, I just assumed because all of your signage is so nice." I was like, taken aback. Someone thought that we had corporate franchise marketing behind our studio signage. Another example is how often someone sends me a picture with the caption, "APA model," or "sporting her APA love," or "this could be an APA commercial." People know our look. My community knows my colors. And the kids and the parents think of my studio when they see pink, purple, and blue together. We did that by design and over the years and years of constant and consistent branding. The more people think about you, the better. So start soon. Put together a branding guide and share it with your team. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. It's simply 2 or 3 fonts that are acceptable to use, your studio colors, which you probably already have, but make sure that you have what's called a PMS color, or it's a number that you can find in Photoshop when you hover over it with the little eyedropper. And that way it's consistently used on all of your materials. And make sure that you have your logo files for your staff to use. It's always good to have a square version and then also one that's better for rectangular spaces. Be specific in your branding guide and stick to it. You can even save your colors in Canva or Photoshop to make them even easier to use. So I hope this episode has inspired you to think about how your studio can stand out in a sea of other after-school activities in your area. Hopefully you've gotten a few ideas to help you along the way. Next week is the last episode of this season of Pliés to Profits, and although I'm sad to wrap it up, I've got a really big episode planned. If you haven't already had a chance, be sure to subscribe and check out all the episodes in the Transform My Dance Studio podcast. I'm Hillary, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Pliés to Profits on the Transform My Dance Studio podcast. You can learn more about Hillary, plus the behind-the-scenes stories from 19 other successful dance studio owners from around the globe in our brand new book, Dance Studio Secrets: 65 Ways to Build a Thriving Studio, is now available on Kindle and paperback from Amazon.com. See you next week for a new episode with our special guest host, Hillary Parnell.